In the flat Earth model of the cosmos, the North Pole is the immovable center of the world and the entire universe. Polaris, the North Star, sits straight over the North Pole, at the highest point in the heavens, and like a slowly rotating planetarium dome, all the celestial bodies revolve around Polaris and over the Earth once per day. The Sun circles over and around the circumference of Earth every 24 hours, steadily traveling each day from the equator during the March vernal equinox up to the Tropic of Cancer at the June summer solstice, back down to the equator for the September autumnal equinox, and all the way down to the Tropic of Capricorn on the December winter solstice. In the flat Earth model, the South Pole does not exist at all, and Antarctica is instead a gigantic ice wall extending the circumference of Earth, holding in the oceans like a giant bowl or a world cup. As strange as this concept may sound at first, it is a fact that if you set a bearing due south from anywhere on Earth, inevitably at or before 78 degrees southern latitude, you will find yourself face to face with an enormous ice wall towering 100 to 200 feet in the air, extending to the east and west the entire circumference of the world. Antarctica is not the tiny ice continent found confined to the underside antipode of astronomers' globes. Quite the contrary, Antarctica literally surrounds us 360 degrees, encircles every continent, and acts as a barrier holding in the oceans. The most commonly asked questions, and the greatest mysteries yet to be solved are, how far does the Antarctic ice extend outwards? Is there a limit? What lies beyond, or is it just snow and ice forever? Thanks to UN treaties and constant military surveillance, the North Pole and Antarctica remain cloaked in government secrecy, both purported no-fly and no-sail zones, with several reports of civilian pilots and captains being shooed away and escorted back under threats of violence. Before reaching the Antarctic ice wall, navigating the increasingly tumultuous southern oceans, explorers encounter the longest, darkest, coldest nights and the most dangerous seas and storms anywhere on Earth. In 1773, Captain Cook became the first modern explorer known to have breached the Antarctic Circle and reached the ice barrier. During 3 voyages lasting 3 years and 8 days, Captain Cook and his crew sailed a total of 60,000 miles along the Antarctic coastline, never once finding an inlet or path through or beyond the massive glacial wall. On October 5, 1839, another explorer, James Clark Ross, began a series of Antarctic voyages lasting a total of 4 years and 5 months. Ross and his crew sailed 2 heavily armored warships thousands of miles, losing many men from hurricanes and icebergs, looking for an entry point beyond the southern glacial wall. Upon first confronting the massive barrier, Captain Ross wrote of the wall, extending from its eastern extreme point as far as the eye could discern to the eastward, it presented an extraordinary appearance, gradually increasing in height as we got nearer to it, and proving at length to be a perpendicular cliff of ice, between 150 feet and 200 feet above the level of the sea, perfectly flat and level at the top, and without any fissures or promontories on its even seaward face. We might with equal chance of success try to sail through the cliffs of Dover as penetrate such a mass. William Carpenter wrote, "Yes, but we can circumnavigate the south easily enough," is often said by those who don't know. The British ship Challenger recently completed the circuit of the southern region, indirectly to be sure, but she was 3 years about it, and traversed nearly 69,000 miles, a stretch long enough to have taken her 6 times round on the globular hypothesis. Dr. Samuel Rowbotham wrote, "If we now consider the fact that when we travel by land or sea, and from any part of the known world in a direction towards the North Polar Star, we shall arrive at one and the same point, we are forced to the conclusion that what has hitherto been called the North Polar region is really the center of the Earth, that from this northern center the land diverges and stretches out, of necessity, towards a circumference, which must now be called the southern region, which is a vast circle, and not a pole or center, In this and other ways, all the great navigators have been frustrated in their efforts, and have been more or less confounded in their attempts to sail round the earth upon or beyond the Antarctic Circle. But if the southern region is a pole or center, like the north, there would be little difficulty in circumnavigating it, for the distance round would be comparatively small. When it is seen that the earth is not a sphere, but a plane, having only one center, the north, and that the south is the vast icy boundary of the world, the difficulties experienced by circumnavigators can be easily understood. If the earth were truly a globe, then every line of latitude south of the equator would have to measure a gradually smaller and smaller circumference the farther south traveled. In other words, the circumference at 10 degrees south latitude would comprise a smaller circle than at the equator, 20 degrees south latitude would comprise a circle smaller than 10, and so on. If, however, the earth is an extended plane, then every line of latitude south of the equator should measure a gradually larger and larger circumference the farther south traveled. 10 degrees south latitude will comprise a larger circle than the equator, 20 degrees south latitude will comprise a circle larger than 10, and so on. Likewise, if the earth were a globe, lines of longitude would bubble out at the equator while converging at the poles. Whereas, if Earth is an extended plane, lines of longitude should simply expand straight outwards from the North Pole. So which is actually the case? David Wardlaw Scott wrote, "Upon the principle as taught by Scripture and common observation that the world is not a planet but consists of vast masses of land stretched out upon level seas, the north being the center of the system, it is evident that the degrees of longitude will gradually increase in width the whole way from the north center to the icy boundary of the great southern circumference, in consequence of the difference between the actual extent of longitudes and that allowed for them by the nautical authorities, which difference, at the latitude of the Cape of Good Hope, has been estimated to amount to a great number of miles. Many shipmasters have lost their reckoning, and many vessels have been wrecked. Ship captains, who have been educated in the globular theory, know not how to account for their getting so much out of their course in southern latitudes, and generally put it down to currents. But this reason is futile, for although currents may exist, they do not usually run in opposite directions, and vessels are frequently wrecked whether sailing east or west." During Captain James Clark Ross's voyages around the Antarctic circumference, he often wrote in his journal, perplexed at how they routinely found themselves out of accordance with their charts, stating that they found themselves an average of 12 to 16 miles outside their reckoning every day, some days as much as 29 miles. Lieutenant Charles Wilkes commanded a United States Navy exploration expedition to the Antarctic from August 18, 1838 to June 10, 1842. Almost 4 years spent exploring and surveying the Southern Ocean. In his journals, Lieutenant Wilkes also mentioned being consistently east of his reckoning, sometimes over 20 miles in less than 18 hours. Dr. Samuel Robotham wrote, "The commanders of these various expeditions were, of course, with their education and belief in the earth's rotundity, unable to conceive of any other cause for the differences between log and chronometer results than the existence of currents. But one simple fact is entirely fatal to such an explanation, that when the route taken is east or west, the same results are experienced. The water of the southern region cannot be running in two opposite directions at the same time, and hence, although various local and variable currents have been noticed, they cannot be shown to be the cause of the discrepancies so generally observed in high southern latitudes between time and log results. The conclusion is one of necessity, forced upon us by the sum of the evidence collected that the degrees of longitude in any given southern latitude are larger than the degrees in any latitude nearer to the northern center, thus proving the already more than sufficiently demonstrated fact that the earth is a plane, having a northern center, in relation to which degrees of latitude are concentric, and from which degrees of longitude are diverging lines, continually increasing in their distance from each other as they are prolonged towards the great glacial southern circumference." The equatorial circumference of the supposed ball Earth is said to be 24,900 statute, or 21,600 nautical miles. A nautical mile is the distance following the supposed curvature of the Earth from 1 minute of latitude to the next. A statute mile is the straight-line distance between the two, not taking into account Earth's alleged curvature. The degrees of longitude, as we proceed southwards, do not diminish as they would upon a globe, but expand or increase as they must if the Earth is a plane, or, in other words, the farthest point, or greatest latitude south, must have the greatest circumference and degrees of longitude. And William Carpenter wrote, "Parallels of latitude only, of all imaginary lines on the surface of the Earth, are circles, which increase progressively from the northern center to the southern circumference. The mariner's course in the direction of any one of these concentric circles is his longitude, the degrees of which increase to such an extent beyond the equator, going southwards, that hundreds of vessels have been wrecked because of the false idea created by the untruthfulness of the charts and the globular theory together, causing the sailor to be continually getting out of his reckoning. With a map of the earth in its true form, all difficulty is done away with, and ships may be conducted anywhere with perfect safety. This, then, is a very important practical proof that the earth is not a globe."
I phoned up Antarctica. There's like a tourist umbrella you have to go through, and I sort of said, "Oh, I've got loads of money. I've got boats in Hawaii and India," which I don't. And me and some friends were going to hack down to Antarctica and walk across it. And I got loads of emails off these people saying, "No, you don't. No, you don't. Fill out your permits. You've got Orange membership. Fill out this. Why are you coming?" I got like totally hammered just for saying I'm coming to Antarctica. What I found is you're only allowed in through New Zealand, South America at the bottom, and South Africa at the bottom. And they take you in, you see some penguins, you sleep somewhere cold, and they throw you back out, all for like $5,000. Now, it's totally locked down, and I did an article about it where I looked at the Treaty of Antarctica, which is some countries got together and locked it down. They've got a lot of science research going on there, and they just don't let anyone in. Now, where this treaty meet, they have a big table that's shaped in a pyramid with the top cut off, which is, you can call me a conspiracy theorist, but there's obviously something there. What would you like to add on the Antarctica rim model, Eric?
Yeah, so Antarctica is not just the tiny ice continent on the bottom of the globe that it shows, but it is the case that no matter where you are on Earth, if you go southwards from there, you'll hit Antarctica. So if you imagine expanding that little Antarctic continent on the bottom of the globe out to an ice rim all the way across, around the Earth, the North Pole being in the center, anywhere you go in a straight line, you will end up going to the ice wall.
Yeah, and many boats through, since the 40s, 50s have talked about my instruments went crazy, there were ice walls for hundreds of miles, I got lost. There's so many of these stories.
Yeah, and so they say that there's a South Pole somewhere too on part of that guided tour that you're talking about. They've got an arbitrary point along the Antarctic ice that they've put a red and white barbershop pole with a ball earth on top of it and claim that that's the South Pole. But they even admit that it's not the real South Pole because the real geomagnetic South Pole is constantly moving. So since it's constantly moving, you're never really going to be able to see it. But the reality is they can't have people going down there with a compass and checking to see if it really is the South Pole.
Last year, Prince Harry was down there, and he basically just made some filming. He was with Rupert and Tarquin and a few of his friends. And the story was, it was on all the mainstream news, Prince Harry in Antarctica. Oh, we had to go back, it was just too cold, my foot got blisters and frostbite. What the message to the subconscious is, it doesn't matter how rich you are, don't go there, it's too cold.
They know that Prince Harry and a team of injured servicemen and women have been walking to the South Pole. Well, they've got there, they've completed the 200-mile Walking with the Wounded South Pole Challenge, that's its proper name. They've spent more than 3 weeks trekking through Antarctica, and this was what it sounded like at the moment when they arrived at the bottom of the world.
Let's go!
sounds quite restrained, doesn't it, after all that effort? Well, they spent 20 hours in a cold chamber. This was the prince and the other competitors who were with him to prepare for the conditions that they were going to find down there. The expedition was supposed to be a race. You might remember it being billed that way before it started, but the weather became so bad as they went along that they scrapped the competitive side of things and just joined up as one big team instead. And this was how Harry reacted after completing the mission.
We're here, we made it. It's Friday the 13th. We've had so many things go against us. We've had beautiful weather, but bad weather before, and bad terrain and injuries and stuff like that. But everyone's made it, all 12 of them, the whole group of 20, whatever it is. But the 12 wounded soldiers have made it. Couldn't have made it without everyone's help, especially back home. You know, the founders, Ed and Simon as well. But everyone is so happy. Everyone's touched the ball. We've all had photos. We've all had hugs, a few tears here and there. But all in all, mission success, basically.
If you're wondering about that ball that he was talking about, it's the ceremonial South Pole at the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station. It's like a metal sphere on a red and white pole, and it's partly surrounded by the flags of the signatories of the Antarctic Treaty. So it's lovely for a photo, but the problem with it is it's not the real South Pole. It's about 300 metres away.
So at the real South Pole, what is that?
Well, there's nothing. That's the thing. You can't see. To do it properly, to cover all your bases, you have to do both. You have to do the picture with the ball, and then you have to go and kind of hang around at the exact
why don't they move the ball
longitude
to
and
where
latitude.
the actual thing is?
Well, that's a very sensible question.
Something for you
It's
to
not
work
one I
on.
can answer,
Okay.
but it's a very good